Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's start straight away from the front lines and from Kotlin. This is the Pokrovsk direction. Before the Russian army tried to counterfence from this side and they took actually this part of the road and the railroad, but Ukraine started one more offensive yesterday. And yes, Ukraine was successful in this direction, causing the Russian army to withdraw the forces from several of the quarters of the settlement. We even have the small deep state military map update where they show that this area now belongs to Ukrainian army. In the eastern flank of Kotlin, the situation for the Russian army remains unstable. They're mostly, I would say, even encircled. Well, not fully by Ukrainian army out there, but Ukraine is capable to cut all of the supplies for Russians in this sector. So they cannot send reinforcements, supplies, and so on. So I predict that this part of the Russian army will try to withdraw from this sector. If we zoom out a little, so this is Pokrovsk, and the Ukrainian army is still successful with its small counter-strikes near it. And yes, we have the confirmation from the Miko 73, the analytic who analyzes the drone cameras, that definitely Ukraine keeps initiative near Pokrovsk. Recently, Ukraine was successful in Shevchenka, Peshana, in Kotlin, and yes, in Udachne as well. Well, the different military maps provide the different information. Here, according to the Miko 73, this area is not the encirclement of the Russian army, it is more to the east. But the deep state military map shows us that the Russians could be trapped in this region. Well, in general, experts agree that Russians renewed the full-scale offensive operations elsewhere on the front lines, well, at least in the main hotspots. However, most of those attacks were stopped by Ukrainian defenders. With many of the Russian attack attempts, Russian army also suffers critical losses, especially not far away from Velika Novosilka and also in Pokrovsk direction. Just recently they've started their attack towards Bogdanivka. As usual, they use the armored vehicles full of infantry. They're like in those cages. And yeah, there is absolutely no escape from the Ukrainian FPV drones. So you have the ammunition inside the vehicle and you have the ammunition outside coming to strike the vehicle. It is total madness. Plus, Russians continue to attack with their motorcycles simultaneously with the armored vehicles or in separate mid-waves. Guys, unfortunately, I cannot show you full images of those motorcycles, of how they're being kaboomed by Ukrainian FPV drones mostly, because after all, there is the Russian infantry and this platform is not okay with me not applying the censorship. For this reason, yeah, just those screenshots here, but I have my Telegram channel where I post the original videos. I just shared those from the other Telegram channels from Ukrainian army who filmed this kind of interesting content. It seems like Russian army is definitely in lack of the armored vehicles and they changed the tactics of their assaults. Like for example, going full in on motorcycles, because motorcycles after all are quite fast. And for our drone operators, it's in a way more complicated task to aim this small target, which is fast moving. But the good point is usually one hit is enough. And here you may see the convoy of the Russian motorcyclists and their armored vehicle all together. They're going, and later on all together they were stopped by the drone operators. So this is the Russian tank and several of the motorcycles nearby. From what I understood, the Ukrainian army doesn't use those motorcycles, so we think that it is not effective way of taking positions, because first of all, there is no protection for the soldiers and you'll 100% have severe losses. So yeah, Bradley or at least Kazakh MRAP vehicle is the good tool for taking positions because it has good protection even against the FPV drone strikes, but here I would call those suicide attacks of the Russian army. However, in some of the rare cases, Russians are able to take the ground, simply because Russians attack with the huge mid-waves in multiple regions, in multiple of the areas, so Ukraine sometimes should use hundreds of the drones to stop the Russian army advancements. That's why Russians, for example, moved ahead not far away from New York village, taking the ground and entering one of the small settlements. However, here they were stopped by Ukrainian artillery. And yeah, they've took this ground, but for what cost? Also, they moved a little from luckily taking this part of the ground, but you can see the movement of the Russian army. It is very, very small, despite on the tremendous forces they use. So honestly, I don't see the perspective for them to take Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk regions, and even Luhansk in a nearby future, or even in a couple of years. Russians tried to move from the Zaporizhia direction, but they suffered losses. In Velika Novosilka, absolutely the same. In Pokrovsk direction as well. In Toretsk, yes, the battles are really heavy, but what's the outcome? What's the solution for the Russian army? I mean, military solution. With the forces and resources Russian army has, it is just a huge meat grinder they created for themselves. Attacking with large convoys, it's the stupid tactics really. And here's the training of the Russian motorcycle south. So one motorcycle with the soldier goes straight away to the reservoir, then soldier leaves the bike there, and the rest of the Russian motorcycles are using the body's motorcycle to just jump over it. It is interesting. There was kind of funny saying in the Russian army, even before the start of the full-scale war, who went to the Russian army doesn't need to go to the circus. Well, now it seems like they combined all of that circus, Russian army, it's all together. Yeah, some of them were not successful from what I understood. Well, mostly Russians are using those kind of the Enduro China-made motorcycles. They're very cheap in production, and I guess they have the direct contracts with China here for the supplements of those bikes. From what I understood, they're made in Lifan factory. The engine is not really huge, it's 250cc as usual, but still it is capable off-road machine for those kind of the dirt roads. And one more Russian attack happened in Guiva direction. Here Russians went forward, actually expanding the gray area. Yeah, as usual, their convoys with a hunger tank on the front, but anyways, they were caputted on the way. They lost huge amount of the infantry vehicles, and as you may see, they already started to use BTR, so the weather is more or less okay. The soil is not dirty any longer, that's why they assault with their motorcycles and other vehicles, sometimes even civilian vehicles. My friends, by the way, if you want to support the job that I do here almost daily on YouTube, you're very welcome to check out my Patreon page. I'll put the link for it in the video description just below. Thank you so much for supporting my motivation. You just keep me running and upload the videos here. You're just awesome, guys. So is there any chance for the peace deal coming? Judging on the Russian actions, no. And we also have kind of the strange signals from the White House. For example, yesterday the Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that if our efforts to stop the war in Ukraine fail within days, we will tell President Trump that negotiations are no longer a viable option. So you might think that the other option is to support Ukraine with more weaponry. It is the logical one, and it is the only option for United States to support democracy. But no, they want to abandon Ukraine. Let's listen to what Donald Trump said yesterday. I'll expedite the video a little for you.
That the U.S. will have to figure out whether a deal can be done between Russia and Ukraine in a matter of days, or you will just move on.
Yeah, very short.
How many days is that?
No specific number of days, but quickly. We want to get it done. We're talking about here people dying. We're talking about over there people are dying also, like on average 2,500 young people, soldiers. They're not from America. They're not from anywhere else other than Ukraine and Russia. But we want to save these lives. So it's 2,500 a week are being killed in battle. It's a vicious battle with the best equipment, the best everything, and it is brutal. 2,500 young people a week. Some of them not so young, actually. They're getting older. They're getting older by the month. But 2,500 a week, and we're going to get it stopped, ideally. Now, if for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully we won't have to do that. And Marco is right in saying we want to see it end. Think of it. Every day, a lot of people are being killed, as we talk about, as they play games. So we're not going to take that, and we'll see. I think we have a good chance of solving the problem, however.
Are you prepared to walk away completely from these efforts and these talks?
Well, I don't want to say that, but we want to see it end.
So basically, Donald Trump is getting ready to proclaim that it's impossible to negotiate with Ukraine and Russia. They're not listening to us. So what can we do? Let's wash our hands and let Russia to occupy Ukraine in this case. Because for sure there will be no military support from the United States to Ukraine. I mean, no new military packages. Donald Trump's philosophy is really strange. He wants to look like some sort of the mediator, negotiator, but there is the weaponry going to Ukraine from the United States of America already. It is used to caput Russians on the front lines. Yeah, it was agreed with the previous military packages, but nevertheless, United States cannot be neutral from any sort of the point, but, Donald Trump, he's different. During all of those negotiations, the United States were pressing and continue to press just Ukraine. The Russian side is pretty much okay. Now Bloomberg writes that the United States offers to ease sanctions on Russia in Ukraine peace proposal. Moreover, there was even the proposal from the United States to recognize Crimea as the Russian territory. Well, Ukraine will never do it, as well as European countries, maybe except Slovakia and Hungary. So yeah, negotiation strategy is very, very strange from the United States of America.
No, nobody's playing me. I'm trying to help. This was Biden's war, by the way. By me getting involved, they'll say, oh, Trump. This is not Trump's war. This is a war that should have never happened. Okay? Think of it.
So from Donald Trump's reassurances that he is going to stop the war in 24 hours, he now says that it is not his war after all, it's Biden's war. Biden started it. That is what he tries to tell here, that if I was a president, blah blah blah, I would negotiate with Putin. Plus he also blames Zelensky, by the way, in his recent speeches. The New York Post writes that Ukraine is almost agreed for the ceasefire proposal, or peace proposal they call it, and now it's up to Russia. It is up to Russia for 1 month already, or even more. Ukraine agreed on a ceasefire from the very beginning. So here in the article they tell that there will be other negotiations coming the next week in London, and it is like go-no-go decision from Russia whether they agree on ceasefire or not. And yeah, United States is even open to recognize Crimea as a Russian in this deal. Well, I think that it would be just a diplomatic defeat for United States, because actually they promised to protect Ukrainian territory in Budapest Memorandum. Yeah, it is just a memorandum, but nevertheless it was some sort of the deal. So who would trust the United States in the future? The United States still has multiple allies across the world in Southeast Asia, but with this move they show that they might trade the territories of the allies. And moreover, they do not even provide enough military support. So the conclusion is simple: if you don't have a reliable and powerful ally which might protect you, and if you have the crazy neighbor like Russia or North Korea with nuclear weaponry, it is better to obtain nuclear weaponry yourself, because after all, it's the only security guarantee which you might have. And in its turn, it is more dangerous for our world, because there will be many of the nuclear countries, so the probability for the nuclear war to start increases dramatically. That is, by the way, Israel is very concerned about Iran, which is up to obtain its nuclear arsenal. Reuters tells that Israel still eyed a limited attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, I think that they wanted to perform the joint attack with the United States forces, and for this reason we actually saw the preparation from the United States as well. But after all, it looks like Donald Trump is not oriented on the strike on Iran right now. Otherwise there would be no negotiations in Oman, but Israeli side really wants to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, my own opinion that aerial strikes will not help to seize the Iranian program. There should be a ground operation if they want to achieve the result in military way. Because some of the nuclear facilities are just hidden in the mountains, inside the mountains. You cannot reach it with any sort of the weaponry. And you know, guys, after all, it's all Donald Trump's fault, because there was negotiation already agreed with Iran during the Obama administration. But then Donald Trump came to power, he cancelled all of that. And from that moment, Iran started to develop its nukes. Well, we'll see how it goes. I guess for this operation, Israel absolutely must have the support of the United States. But what is the Russians' reaction here? Well, they continue to insist on denazification of Ukraine and also on dismissing Zelensky from power. We have this information coming from the New York Times, and they rely to some of the officials from the White House that definitely during the negotiations Russia insists on that, which means that Russia says no to any sort of the agreement, peace agreement with Ukraine. For Russia, the policy of Donald Trump is very profitable after all. Because if Donald Trump, as he says, abandons Ukraine, so there will be no any future military support of Ukraine, at least under Donald Trump's presidency. So why would Russia agree to that ceasefire? They would be just able to take more ground because there will be no spare parts for Bradleys, no ammunition for Ukraine coming from US. And putting things that it would be enough for achieving the military result to take more ground of Ukraine. So I would call the policy of the United States now is basically a capitulation in front of Russia. And I may also call it a betrayal of the own ally. Well, the good news that Europe would not agree on that and they'll continue to support Ukraine, and the United States is kind of angry about it, because after all it seems like they will be the only ally which could abandon Ukraine. And yeah, it's the huge reputational loss for USA, but they want to make business with Russia more than supporting own allies. Guys, they, I mean not Americans, but Trump's team and Donald Trump himself. And yes, in the New York Times article they say that Donald Trump is not looking to provide more support for Ukraine, I mean new military packages. The situation is basically awesome for Putin. Yeah guys, as you can see we have the mixed news for today, so some of the good news from the front lines partially, but from the political perspective, well, I would say that those are not good news for United States as well. And how are we gonna get out from this idiocracy happening? For now, I don't have any sort of the clue. But I'm sure that in a long-term perspective, everything will be fine and Americans will never do their mistake as they did in November last year, electing crazy idiot. And guys, about this channel and the videos I post here, I promise you to keep up with the schedule. I try to keep up with it. Sometimes I cannot do it. But still, I try to do it every day, and with your likes, you actually help me a lot. Now, my friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.